This just happened. We just found out that Charlie Kirk got shot.
It's fucking awful.
Joe Rogan has heard just about everything on his podcast, from alien conspiracies to presidential debates. But what unfolded live on his show shocked him to his core. Mid-conversation, news broke that the FBI had caught the man accused of taking out conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Rogan froze, then reacted in the only way he knows how: raw, unfiltered, and brutally honest. He didn't just process the arrest, he questioned what it meant for the future of free speech in America. Before we dive deeper, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It only takes a second and helps us keep unpacking stories like this one. And Rogan's first words after hearing the news made it clear. This wasn't just another headline.
And is he dead?
That's what was just...
One of the guys out there just said it was confirmed that he's dead.
In the lobby was just...
I've been looking. I haven't seen anything that said confirmed.
Whoa.
Murder for having a different opinion from somebody else.
Yeah.
Different ideology from somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
Beliefs that didn't align.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Dead?
The FBI's announcement hit the podcast table like a thunderclap. Reports confirmed that 22-year-old Tyler Robinson had been arrested after a tense manhunt and now faced capital charges for the shooting that left Charlie Kirk's life cut short during a university appearance. Investigators revealed they had texts and other digital evidence that looked like a confession, with Robinson allegedly ranting about Kirk's political influence. Rogan's co-hosts tried to process it in real time, refreshing Twitter feeds and second-guessing whether it was even true. But the updates came one after another. Yes, Kirk was gone. Yes, the FBI had the suspect in custody. Rogan's face shifted from disbelief to quiet anger. He reminded listeners that disagreeing with someone's views should never escalate to this, ever. But his reaction didn't stop with shock. It turned into a deeper warning about where the culture is headed. Leaning back in his chair, Rogan muttered the same words over and over. Nobody deserves that. It wasn't just filler. You could hear the weight in his voice, like he was trying to convince himself it had really happened. His co-host jumped in, pointing out the surreal timing, asking if Kirk's passing was even confirmed. But Rogan's focus never wavered. What horrified him wasn't just the act itself, but the idea that someone would justify silencing another person permanently just because they hated his opinions. Rogan has built his career on conversations, on the idea that debate, even heated debate, is better than censorship or violence. And now, right in front of millions of listeners, he was confronted with the reality that open dialogue had turned into a target. This is the kind of thing that makes people afraid to speak at all, he warned. In that moment, Rogan's shock wasn't just about Kirk. It was about what this meant for anyone brave enough to speak publicly. And when the suspect's profile started coming out, Rogan's frustration only grew stronger. Within hours of the arrest, details about Tyler Robinson began flooding online. The FBI released only the basics: a 22-year-old with a troubled past, now facing charges that could put him away for life. But the internet wasted no time digging deeper. Old social media posts surfaced, showing Robinson ranting about politics, mocking conservative speakers, and even bragging about shutting people down. Screenshots were shared across X, TikTok, and Reddit, with some users claiming he had been planning this for weeks. Rogan listened to the reports in disbelief. "This is a kid," he said, shaking his head. "You're telling me someone barely out of high school thought this was the answer?" His frustration wasn't just with Robinson himself, but with the environment that had allowed his rage to grow unchecked. Rogan warned that too many young people are spending endless hours online, spiraling into echo chambers that feed anger instead of perspective. He pointed out how algorithms often push users further into one mindset until they can't see a way out. The more Robinson's story unfolded, the clearer it became that this wasn't a sudden outburst. It was a build-up. Friends from school described him as quiet but obsessed with arguments on the internet. Others said he was drawn to content that glorified confrontation, framing it as the only way to win. Rogan latched onto that detail, saying it proves something he's been shouting about for years, that our culture is turning debates into battlegrounds, and people are starting to treat them like wars instead of conversations. Think about that, Rogan emphasized. This guy didn't just disagree. He thought shutting someone down completely was victory. That's insane. That's where we're at now. His words hung heavy, a mix of anger and sadness. For Rogan, Robinson wasn't just the suspect, he was a reflection of a much bigger problem simmering in the country. And as more shocking details about Robinson's motives came out, Rogan's tone only grew sharper. As investigators dug deeper, the question everyone was asking became clear. Why? Why would someone so young risk everything to take such a drastic step? The FBI hinted at the answer in a press briefing, revealing that Robinson had left behind a trail of angry notes and digital rants. Screenshots from his phone suggested he believed Kirk was, quote, dangerous to the country, not because of anything Kirk had done personally, but because Robinson felt his influence was growing too quickly. Rogan leaned forward, visibly unsettled. So this wasn't random, he said, almost to himself. This guy actually thought he was saving people? It was the kind of twisted justification that Rogan had warned about countless times, when ideology turns into obsession and obsession turns into action. What made things even stranger was that Robinson didn't seem to belong to any one group. He wasn't officially tied to an organization, no obvious network, no mastermind behind him. Instead, it looked like the internet had become his mentor. Investigators said he had bookmarked clips from fiery debates, endless tic-tacs mocking conservative speakers, and chat rooms where extreme ideas were treated like casual conversation. It painted a picture not of a mastermind, but of someone lost in an online echo chamber until he couldn't tell opinion from reality. Rogan's frustration boiled over. He warned that this wasn't just about politics, it was about a bigger cultural sickness, where people aren't learning how to debate or disagree anymore, only how to destroy. This is what happens when people start thinking the other side isn't even human, Rogan said flatly. It's not just wrong, it's dangerous. For his audience, it was a chilling reminder. The suspect didn't just lash out randomly. He believed he was justified, even heroic. And that, Rogan argued, is what makes this case so much more terrifying. Because if one young man could convince himself this was the answer, how many more are quietly heading down the same path? By this point in the podcast, Rogan's shock had turned into something sharper, a warning. He told his listeners that Robinson's arrest wasn't just a story about one troubled young man, it was a mirror held up to America. This isn't just about Charlie Kirk, Rogan said. This is about how divided we've let ourselves become. If people think taking someone out is a solution, we've completely lost the plot. He pointed out that the country has been spiraling into a state where opponents aren't just seen as wrong, they're seen as enemies. Rogan argued that when you mix that mindset with 24/7 social media feeds, you create a recipe for disaster. Algorithms reward outrage, platforms reward the loudest, most extreme takes, and the younger generation is growing up in a digital world where winning an argument doesn't mean learning something new, it means crushing the other side so badly they never speak again. This is what I've been saying for years, Rogan continued. You can't build a healthy society if nobody can even talk anymore. Debate is supposed to be messy, it's supposed to be uncomfortable, but it's never supposed to end with someone losing their life. His words carried a weight that was hard to ignore because he wasn't speaking as a politician or an activist. He was speaking as someone who has built his career on the power of dialogue. Rogan stressed that the responsibility didn't just fall on politicians or the media. It fell on regular people, too. Parents raising kids in a digital age, friends checking on each other before things spiral, audiences demanding better conversations instead of rewarding endless outrage. To Rogan, this wasn't just an isolated tragedy. It was a warning flashing in bright red letters across the country. And as his co-hosts nodded in agreement, Rogan left listeners with a chilling thought. If this is what happens when one person snaps, what happens if more start thinking the same way? That question left the room in silence and set the stage for the most heated part of Rogan's reaction. The studio didn't stay quiet for long. Rogan's co-hosts jumped in with their own takes, and what started as a somber reaction quickly turned into a fiery back and forth. One of them argued that incidents like this were bound to happen in such a politically charged environment. Look at the way people talk online, he said. It's not conversation, it's war. And when you live in that mindset long enough, eventually someone takes it offline. Rogan didn't disagree, but he pushed back hard on the idea that this was inevitable. No, man, that's the problem, Rogan shot back. We can't just shrug and say this is what happens. If we accept this, then we're saying violence is part of the political process, and that's terrifying. Another co-host tried to offer a different angle, suggesting that Robinson wasn't just a product of culture, but of personal failure. There's a million people online hearing the same stuff. They don't all snap. This guy made a choice. That's on him. Rogan paused, nodded, but then countered. Sure, he made the choice, but look at the environment that shaped him. We can't separate the two. You feed a kid nonstop outrage and tell him his enemies are ruining the world. What do you expect? The debate grew intense, with each person raising their voice slightly higher, not in anger at each other, but in the urgency of the moment. The clash of perspectives made the conversation raw, unpolished, and impossible to turn away from. It wasn't just Rogan venting anymore. It was a live example of how hard it is to even talk about something this heavy without hitting walls of disagreement. And yet Rogan kept steering the discussion back to one point. Disagreement doesn't have to mean destruction. He said, we're sitting here arguing, and that's fine, that's healthy, that's how it should be. But the second you start believing the person across from you shouldn't exist, you're already lost. His words hit hard, and even his co-host had to pause. The tension wasn't about division anymore. It was about how fragile the line has become between debating someone and dehumanizing them. And as the back and forth settled, Rogan's prepared to tackle the bigger picture, what this arrest means for free speech in America. After the debate cooled, Rogan shifted the conversation to something bigger than just one suspect or one tragedy, the future of free speech itself. He reminded his audience that Charlie Kirk wasn't some violent agitator roaming the streets. He was a guy showing up at college campuses, giving talks, sparking arguments, and encouraging debates. You don't have to agree with him, Rogan said, but that's the whole point of free speech. You can challenge him, push back, prove him wrong. That's how it works. But now, Rogan worried this case might set a darker precedent. If one person decides that a different opinion deserves violence, it could send a chilling message to others. People might start second-guessing themselves before speaking, holding back the real views out of fear of becoming a target. It's like a muzzle, man, Rogan said. Not from the government, but from other citizens. That's even scarier. The conversation touched on history, too. Rogan compared this moment to past decades when controversial voices were either silenced or attacked. He noted how societies often look back at those times with regret, realizing too late that shutting people down didn't solve the problem. It only made the divide grow stronger. His co-hosts agreed that the internet plays a huge role here. Unlike the past, arguments don't stay in small corners anymore. Every debate is amplified. Every controversial clip goes viral. And every opinion, no matter how unpopular, can spark nationwide outrage in minutes. That constant exposure can inspire healthy conversations, but it can also inspire dangerous actions. Rogan's tone grew sharper. If you take away the option to talk, to argue, to disagree, what's left? Violence. That's what's left. His words landed heavy, the kind of statement that makes listeners stop scrolling and really think. And just when the room felt heavy with that reality, Rogan hinted at something even more unsettling. Could this whole case actually trigger a larger conflict nobody's ready for? Rogan didn't stop at free speech. He took the conversation to a much darker place. What happens next? He warned that when moments like this hit the national spotlight, they can act like sparks in a room full of gasoline. Think about it, Rogan said. You've got millions of people who loved Charlie Kirk, who followed him, who respected him. If they believe he was attacked just for speaking his mind, that could push some folks over the edge. His co-hosts immediately chimed in, worried about the same thing. One compared it to flashpoints in history, like the Rodney King riots, where one single event set off a chain reaction of chaos across the country. Another brought up how leaders like JFK and RFK weren't just mourned, their deaths reshaped politics for decades. Rogan leaned forward, his voice quieter but heavier. This feels like a tipping point moment. You don't want to say it out loud, but it's there. If people see this as a war on ideas, then some are gonna fight back. And once that cycle starts, it's almost impossible to control. The tension in the studio was sharp. Everyone knew Rogan wasn't predicting civil war, but he was pointing out how fragile the balance really is. One heated incident, one arrest, one misinterpreted headline, that's all it takes to fuel the feeling that the country is split beyond repair. And yet, what really unsettled Rogan was the role of media. He warned that news outlets and online voices might twist the story, spinning it to fit their narratives. The wrong headline at the wrong time, and suddenly you've got thousands of people ready to fight for a version of events that may not even be true. The conversation ended with Rogan shaking his head. He said, "We're already in a dangerous place, but this could be the thing that pushes it way further than anyone's ready for." And that's when Rogan brought it back to something chillingly real. Just how lucky Donald Trump was to survive his own recent scare. By the end of the conversation, Rogan's message was clear. This wasn't just about Charlie Kirk or even the suspect the FBI caught. It was about the dangerous path society is walking down. He warned that when disagreement turns into dehumanization, when debate turns into violence, the very idea of free speech collapses. "We've forgotten how to argue," Rogan said. "Now it feels like the only options are silence or destruction. And if that's true, we're in real trouble." His co-hosts echoed the same fear, admitting that the line between healthy discourse and outright hostility has never felt thinner. They noted how social media amplifies every conflict, twisting narratives and making enemies out of neighbors. And yet, through all the intensity, Rogan reminded his listeners that change is still possible. He said it's not too late. We can still choose to talk, to listen, to challenge each other without tearing everything apart. But that choice has to start now. The conversation left the audience with a haunting question. Is America prepared to face these divisions head on? Or will more tragedies force the point before it's too late? And if you've stuck with me this far, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It's free and it helps me keep breaking down these stories the way they deserve. Who knows what's coming next, but you won't want to miss it.